Hello and welcome to this evening's episode of On the Record. My name is Vuyo. The show tonight, former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Perez on his regrets and the prospects for peace in the Middle East.
The world is full of prejudices, particularly about the past. The past is a mistake. You know, the past is still shadowing our future. We were not born to be bad people.
First up, though, our lead story for this evening. The Independent Electoral Commission is at the crossroads and is now heading for the Constitutional Court to try and get a few things cleared. With the country facing a crucial election in a few months' time, isn't it time we asked, does the IEC have its house in order, or has it dropped the ball?
The Electoral Court found that the IEC failed to comply with last year's Constitutional Court ruling. That judgment included that the voters' roll must have the addresses of voters. However, according to the IEC, more than 62% of the electorate don't have formal addresses.
Since the inception of the voters' roll in 1998, the Electoral Commission has held the view that disenfranchising a voter on the basis of a lack of a formal address would be unacceptable in a country where there are millions of people who live in informal settlements and in rural communities.
It is unclear how soon the Constitutional Court will be able to provide that clarity. However, that's not deterring the IEC from running the by-elections it postponed last week.
The judgment does not necessarily mean that the fact that we are taking it to the Constitutional Court, therefore we should actually now stop doing all the work that we need to do in order to ensure that all these processes take place. There's got to be an election in Tlokwe. The people of Tlokwe have been waiting for the elections for a long time now.
What is clear is that the Tlokwe case will affect how the elections are run in the future, and it's a race against time. The municipal elections must be held by August the 16th.
There has never been a consideration to postpone the election. That question has never arisen, and it will not arise. We are confident that we'll be able to deal with all the issues that we're supposed to be dealing with, and we will then be able to deliver the elections within constitutionally stipulated period.
The IEC will host its first voter registration campaign this weekend. Aldrin Simpier, SABC News, Centurion.
Well, joining us now from our Pretoria office is the Vice Chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Terry Tsalane. Mr. Tsalane, good evening and thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, you will be meeting very soon with various stakeholders. Take us through what you will be meeting with them about.
Essentially, as the Commission, we felt that it was going to be necessary for us to have consultative discussions with political parties. As you know, that they are an interested party in relation to the issues that we are dealing with here. To run an election, you require the support of all your major stakeholders. And thus far, the conversations we have had with the political parties has clearly illustrated to us that they would like to have a conversation with us in relation to how we deal with the judgment, both of the Electoral Court as well as the Constitutional Court. So the intention is to consult with the political parties in relation to what we are doing as the Electoral Commission in respect to those two judgments.
We understand that the Commission met with the President today. Anything you may want to share with us?
Not really. There was nothing really that critical. It is part of the process of consultation with the political parties and political leaders, as we have indicated. We will also be meeting with other political parties in Cape Town on Wednesday. So the process of consultation started today with the conversation that we had with the President. And from here, we're proceeding with all other political parties as indicated.
But what exactly are you going to be telling these stakeholders? What are you putting on the table?
Essentially, what we are saying to the political parties is that we are proceeding with raising this issue at the Constitutional Court level, but at the same time we are proceeding with the by-elections that were postponed. Firstly, those that were postponed by the Electoral Court in Tlokwe. We're going to proceed with preparations and the delivery of those elections on the 6th of April. But apart from those, you may recall that the other by-elections that we postponed as the Electoral Commission, and we will also be proceeding with our arrangements to make sure that we deliver those elections, and at the same time deal with our preparation for 2016.
Now, to use your words you used earlier today, the IEC was found wanting. Now, isn't that what should be confronted head on, and perhaps less the other stuff, or am I missing the point altogether?
No. You are not. Remember that in terms of the Constitutional Court judgment, there were 3 areas where we were found wanting by the Constitutional Court. The first one was that we had submitted the voters' roll late to the political parties and candidates contesting the elections. The second one was that we had given the political parties and candidates voters' roll with no addresses. And the last was that we had allowed people who were not ordinarily resident in areas where the by-elections were taking place to register and to vote in those areas. Now, following the Constitutional Court judgment, we proceeded to make arrangements in Tlokwe. But it is important for you to understand this, that the issue that we are dealing with, which relates to the addresses, it's a historical issue. It's an issue that has been there since 1998 when we started with the voters' roll. Our first focus when we dealt with this issue of developing a voters' roll was not the addresses. We were more focused on making sure that South Africans who had a barcoded ID were registered and were registered in great numbers. And unfortunately, in the process of doing that, since 1998, there were quite a number of people who submitted their details, but their details did not contain addresses, and therefore we did not really focus much on those addresses. But now, following the Constitutional Court judgment, it means we must now begin to ensure that all those people who have now registered since 1998 have got addresses next to their names.
But isn't it an issue, though, Mr. Tsarane, that for the IEC to submit late, for the IEC to be found wanting, not having done what it was supposed to do, is cause for concern. And it's an issue that should be just as emphasized as the other issues that you are raising, perhaps need to be emphasized.
No, there are 2 issues. One, I have just explained to you what happened in relation to the Constitutional Court in November, and how we attempted to deal with the issues related to that judgment. We were found wanting by that Constitutional Court judgment of the 30th of November. But following that, we then proceeded to make sure that we implement the Constitutional Court judgment as we understood it. But it appears to us that there is confusion in terms of what was actually required to be done, because we understood the judgment to be prospective, which meant in our interpretation that all other elections flowing from, or rather registration flowing from the 30th of November, we would have to ensure that any person who registers has got now the address. And we have done that in the case of Tlokwe. But unfortunately, we've got a legacy of the past, as I've indicated, where you've got people who registered in 1998, they have not updated their details, they did not have their addresses. What do you do with these people? Do you now say, now that we're going into the elections, you are not going to be participating in the elections just because you don't have an address? It's a matter that we're trying to find an interpretation from the Constitutional Court on. But at the same time, we are proceeding with our preparations as though everything is going according to the interpretation. In other words, whether we are losing or winning the case, we've got to make sure that the addresses for all those people who are going to be participating in the elections. We understand from where we stand that We can't disenfranchise people just on the basis that they do not have addresses. We've got to find, firstly, that interpretation from the court that confirms our interpretation, but at the same time, continue to have the elections as stipulated by the Electoral Court within 6 weeks. So we have already gone all the way to make sure that every aspect is catered for so that we can have this by elections on the 6th of April as stipulated by the Electoral Court.
But then isn't the prospect real that someone or party A can know that it's bound to lose a ward or a municipality and then bus people from another area to bolster its support? Aren't those prospects real? In other words, one shouldn't be, the issue of disenfranchising people shouldn't be the one that really, is taken more seriously than the real prospect of people or a party busing people in order to win a municipality or an election.
I think both issues are important. The judgment of the Constitutional Court has indicated that in order for us to have free and fair elections, we've got to ensure that people are registered in places where they are ordinarily resident. This is what the legislation says. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that people are not being bused from one area to the other in order to influence the outcome of the elections or by-elections. But as we do this, we've got to make sure that the rights of South Africans as enshrined within the Constitution are protected. So it's a very difficult issue when we're raising the issue of the address, but at the same time, we are going to have to find, as the Constitutional Court indicated, sufficient information or sufficient particularities for us to be able to say with confidence that these people who are registered in this area are indeed registered within the area where they are ordinarily resident.
What happens if the Concord rules that you have to have the addresses? What happens to the local government elections that you are preparing for?
We're proceeding. We're going to proceed with this process, as I've indicated. For us, it's not either or. We're proceeding to raise this issue with the Constitutional Court, but at the same time, we're proceeding in the manner that we interpreted the Constitutional Court judgment, and therefore we are going to be continuing to try to get the updates of the addresses of people within the voters' roll. We've got the registration weekend on the 5th and 6th of March. We are going to be urging our people to update their details, to make sure that if they have moved from one area to the other, they put in their new addresses. But if they have not moved, that they still call the IEC or fill in a form where they will indicate their details. So the issue of populating the voters' roll with addresses proceeds. The Commission has taken that decision that we're going to be proceeding with this arrangement until such time that the matter is actually sufficiently dealt with.
And you are confident that the upcoming local government elections won't be affected, whatever the decision is the decision of the Constitutional Court?
Absolutely.
So you
from our side,
for whatever eventuality?
Absolutely. From our side, we are saying that the question of the postponement of 2016 local government election has not arisen, and there is no reason for us even to start debating that particular issue. We are confident that all the provisions within the judgment will be met, and that there will be a common understanding of what is required, and that there won't be any necessity of us as the Commission to even start having a conversation on the issue of the postponement or prospect of postponement of the 2016 local government elections. That for us is not a question. We are confident, we've got the capacity, and we will put in place mechanisms to make sure that we deliver the 2016 local government elections within a constitutionally stipulated period.
In your meetings, the meetings we were having over the past few days as the Commission, are you convinced in your own minds that you've done everything that you needed to do, and that this episode hasn't affected the integrity and the independence of the Commission at all?
I am convinced, and the Commission is convinced, that we have put every mechanism in place to make sure that we can have free and fair elections. And I think to a large extent, at the beginning, quite a number of political parties and South Africans did not understand the nature of the problem we are dealing with. Now that there is an understanding, almost all the political parties are gravitating towards our position, and they begin to realize the gravity of the situation. And on the basis of that, on the basis of the cooperation that we already have and enjoy with all the political parties, we are convinced that people will begin to understand what the problem is, what the nature of the problem is, and how we're dealing with that particular problem. So the issue of integrity of our Commission, I don't think really arises out of this. The confusion that arose after the first judgment has now been addressed. People understand that we've got an issue of the addresses, and the majority of our people do not have formal addresses, particularly in informal settlements and in villages. And it is important for us that we do not disenfranchise these people, that we do every little thing to comply with the judgment of the Constitutional Court, but still find sufficient particularities to make sure that these people are contained, their details are contained within the voters' roll, so that we do not have any more difficulties.
Mr. Tselane, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
You're most welcome, sir.
Terry Tselane, the Deputy Chairperson of the Independent Electoral Commission. Well, time to take a quick ad break, but don't go away. This story continues.
I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Rebecca Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful. Have you ever considered skin bleaching?
Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Record. And to talk more on this IEC story, I'm joined now by Professor Lucky Matebula from our Pretoria studios and Professor Andre Duvenage from our Mafikeng studios. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. If I may start with you, Professor Duvenage. I mean, you have intimate knowledge of this Tlokwe story. What are the issues that it raises from where you're sitting?
Good evening, Vuyo. I must tell you I'm very much concerned about the logistics of the election. If we talk about the national local elections, we are talking about 25 million potential voters. We are talking about more than 22,000 wards. And if we look at the 6 wards in Tlokwe, we already identify more than 4,000 so-called potential ghost voters. Now, therefore, my problem is, can we deliver a free and fair election without verification of addresses. And if we need to do this in 22,000+ wards, it's going to be a very, very big task for the IEC. And I cannot see them completing this successfully before the 16th of August this year. And if this is the implication, then most probably we will need a constitutional change in Parliament in order to postpone the election. Shortly, what Tlokwe did was a big knock-on effect on local national elections. And I believe that you need verified addresses to deliver a free and fair election.
Well, the the vice chairperson of the IEC doesn't seem to think so. He thinks that they are well on track. They'll be able to prepare for whatever eventuality. The issues you are raising don't even arise from where he's sitting.
I have heard that you need about 8 million addresses out of that 25 million in order to verify all the addresses. And to get this done in 2 to 3 months or 5 months is going to be a huge task. Now, it will be dependent on the decision of the Constitutional Court. But according to the criteria for elections, if you vote in a ward, you need to have a permanent address. And unfortunately, at this point, it seems as if there's a big backlog. So I have serious concerns about the ability of the IEC to deal with this matter on time.
Let's bring in Professor Mathebula here, who is in our Pretoria studios. Prof, what is your take?
Good evening, Vuyo. My take is that there is a procedural issue here, and there are substantive issues here. The substantive issue is that people have a right to vote. The procedural issue here is that you need to look what are the historical issues about addresses. I'll tell you that I know of a project that the post office tried to give every South African a address or a postal address so that people must be identified. But the spatial issues in the country made it difficult for the post office. Now, if you compound the challenges in the post office just about getting people to have addresses, the matter becomes serious. So my take is that you need a conversation among political parties. That conversation must acknowledge that there are historical imbalances about addresses, because we cannot ignore that we are coming from a historical environment where people did not have addresses. And because of that reality, we cannot then want to be procedurally dogmatic when we know that there is a substantive issue of the right to vote and franchise rights. And the balance between the two, I think, is what the vice chairperson of the IEC said. As they are consulting with the political parties, I think those conversations are particularly dealing about that. But if you look at Tlokwe, it's a jewel. You can see that the stress on the procedural qualifications that Tlokwe must have is because Tlokwe is a jewel in the Northwest. It's the best performing municipality. It has consistently had unqualified audit reports. It has a blue drop water status. 90% of the internal roads are tarred. It has high housing development, and it has the highest intellectual per capita in the Northwest. Now, all those things make you to go for Tlokwe in a procedural matter. But if you take the substantive issues, you'll realize that there are many people in Tlokwe who are going to be disenfranchised because they don't have postal addresses.
Prof, there's something I want to tease with you, but I just want us to go back to Professor Juvenache for a while. Prof, if you were the IEC, what would you do? If you're in charge of the IEC, what would you be doing now to deal with this problem? There are the issues that Professor Mathebula is raising, which are very legitimate issues given our history and everything. So what would you do?
Vuyo, the core criteria is to deliver a free and fair election. And if you look at the criteria for a single member constituency, you need to have the addresses. So I will start looking for the addresses as soon as possible. I will use cell phone addresses and other addresses to identify individuals to a certain point. Otherwise, you cannot deliver a free and fair election. That is part of the electoral model we are talking. If we want a free and fair election, then we need to have the addresses. So the only way I can see the IEC dealing with this is to find the addresses or to identify and connect people to a certain address. This is unfortunately all they can do if they want to deliver a free and fair election. I remember that there's a number of problems with regard to the history. It was referred to earlier, but I still believe if you want a free and fair election, you need to have verifying the addresses at all levels.
Okay, Prof, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
How great would it be to have Sia back for this reunion?
He's been traveling Africa for years. He's impossible to get a hold of.
We know what he drinks.
Let's find him.
Yeah!
You think it worked?
Hey, guys!
I'm coming home, tell the world that I'm coming home.
It all comes together with a castle.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Welcome back. We continue with tonight's conversation, and let's go back now to Professor Mathebula. Prof, you did raise, the history you were talking about and why it's important to take those factors into account. But there's new things that have crept in. Our democracy has probably become, well, arguably, a lot more dynamic with prospects of, losing, others winning and others losing, municipalities being more real. And with that, the real prospects of possible fraud. So there is that reality that someone could bus people from somewhere else and get them to vote in an area to boost their numbers. How do we deal with that situation?
Vuyo, the human element, which can either be negative or positive, is always there. But we cannot assume that in all instances where people are arguably justified to argue that they don't have addresses themselves. The issue of addresses, it's a serious fundamental thing that we are not addressing the systemic issues. One, is directly related to property ownership. There are people that are not propertied, and they have addresses based on the relatives that they have. You know, the family structure of some of the people in the congested areas has got all those challenges. But that notwithstanding, this does not mean that the IEC should not make efforts to make sure that the people that are voting, they have addresses, because the Constitutional Court has ruled that they need to make sure that they confirm the people that are there. But a conversation in the country still needs to be entered into to say, how do you deal with people that genuinely do not have those addresses and they have ID numbers and they are just vagabonding following where jobs are? I mean, for instance, where we live, there are people that come into the urban areas and their addresses are in the rural areas, but they are resident in the urban areas. How do you deal with that? I hear what Professor Duvenage is saying. Unfortunately, that is a criteria, but the conversations that the ANC is having with political parties, I hope it will resolve that, because we cannot disenfranchise people because of structural things that are a matter of the state and its institutions to deal with.
If you were part of those conversations between the IEC and the political parties, what issues would we flag?
As Professor Duvenage said, you have to attach people to some addresses. And that was the fundamental issue in this case, because Kam and others, they were arguing that some of the people that voted in those wards do not live there. The question is, who confirms that they don't live there? Is it the political party that's complaining, or is it the landlord or the person that owns the house that can certify that these people are living here? They might not have been there when people are seeing them on a daily basis. So it's a conversation thing. We must not think that in 20 years where we are, everything is honky-dory. There are still a lot of structural issues in this country that still needs to be addressed. And property issues which are linked to addresses is one of them. And I mean, nobody can deny that the debate on land and properties is directly related to enfranchising of people in the constituencies. It's no shock to me that the ANC is one of the parties that is not ready to get into these constituency-based elections for national elections, because it understands, and I think many other parties understand, that once you go that route, you are bringing up the debate on the migration of people, the ownership of land, and all those things.
But isn't that what elections are about? That the best person to really take up your concerns or to address your concerns, or you believe has the potential to address your concerns, is the person who should get your vote. So I mean, it shouldn't be something to fear.
As long as you don't have structural issues that disenfranchise people, if the fairness and the freeness of the elections can, as part of that criteria, include that people were structurally, the elections were structurally fair, you were not excluded to vote in your locality because you could not demonstrate other things which we know the history of.
But if someone is left with the perception that the election wasn't free and fair, that is just as damaging, isn't it? To the credibility, so far as the credibility of that election is concerned.
Look, Vuyo, notwithstanding, I must not be understood to be saying people that do not have addresses must be allowed to vote. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the process needs to be managed in such a way that it recognizes those challenges. Otherwise, it's going to leave other people outside. And that is the challenge of South Africa in many other aspects of our daily life. And if it goes to where the legitimacy of those that are elected is now going to be questioned by those that did not participate in the elections because they did not have addresses, the situation becomes worse.
Professor Duvenage, your closing comments?
I agree to a certain extent with Professor Mtambula, but my problem is still you need to make a choice either between historical legitimacy on the one side and the legacy of the history, or a free and fair election. And if we look at the electoral system on local level, we have a mixed system, 50% proportional, where you do not need addresses. But for the other 50%, the only way you can deliver free and fair elections is to connect an individual to a certain address. And therefore, if you are not going to connect people, you are not going to deliver free and fair elections. And my assessment at this point is this is going to be the most difficult election for the IEC. And therefore, they need to be independent. They need to be free and fair. We cannot have questions about the elections. If there's going to be questions about the elections itself, then it's going to be a source for conflict and maybe even violence. And this can be very negative for our democracy.
Professor Juvenage and Professor... Yes, Prof, quickly.
There's a duality here that we must deal with. The duality in this instance is that you've got the procedural issues of these elections, but you have the substantive issues of these elections. We have a 300-year period of struggle that deals with the substantive issues of franchise rights. We've got to balance that substantive issue of the right to vote with the procedural issues which have its own history, which is the addresses. And if the two are not going to be balanced, either way, those that are excluded because they don't have addresses, not of their own making, but because they're just in squatter camps, and if they're not allowed to vote because their addresses are not formalized, they are also an equal problem as those that have addresses and they complain that others voted without addresses. So it's something that I think Terry Tsilane says they are busy negotiating in the process. He has not answered you on what are they discussing, but I think it makes sense if that is what they are discussing.
Professor Mathebula, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mathebula and Juvenage, really enlightening us on this issue that is going to be with us, I'm sure, for a very long time. Well, after the break, a candid sit down with the former president of Israel, Shimon Perez. Don't go away.
Searching for the guy who steps up, way up, the queen of the pop and lock, and whatever this is, the party train conductor, all aboard. The answer is yes, you are that guy, and we salute you, party comrade. Join the movement online.
Well, tonight we leave you with part one of an exclusive interview with Israel's former head of state, Shimon Perez, who was in the country this past weekend. Perez's political career in Israel spans over 6 decades, culminating in him becoming president in 2007. Reflecting on his time as the head of the Knesset, Perez has very few regrets. I began by asking him his views on terrorism. Don't forget us to join us tomorrow for part 2 of this interview. From me, Vuyo Mvoko, and the rest of the crew, it's a good night.
Well, there's a difference between terror and war. What is the difference? In war, you wanted to gain something. Say land, or natural resources, or precious stones like here. You want to take it. Terror is a protest, an insult. People say, you have insulted us. You made us poor, secondary, and now you have to pay the price. but they cannot achieve it by cutting heads. You don't make persons better persons. And what I'm telling my friends all over the world is, gentlemen, you have to fight terror, but don't buy rifles and don't learn how to kill terrorists. What you can do, and you have enough money, is to fight the reasons for terror, namely the sense of insult, namely the poverty, the ignorance. The answer to terror are universities. Let the young people go there. They can achieve science with their own strength and devotion. You know, in our universities, what we are doing at Israel, and I think we should be delighted to help, and we are helping many other countries too. You know, you are talking about Israel and the discrimination. Israel helped millions and millions of people all over the world to overcome arid land, to overcome problems with agriculture, health. I think as a small country, we did more than any others. We don't keep it for ourselves. In the universities, you can build your high-tech. You know, we have 13,000 companies at the universities, run by students. They build the future. You can do alike. We have 60,000 students who are building their own future. You know, the two poorest countries on earth were China and India. They showed that they can help themselves and escape poverty without getting neither money from the Americans nor getting money from the Russians, and without terror. They united, and we have to be believers. I'm a religious man. I really believe that we were born to be better, not worse.
Is the way you see terror today the way you've always seen it? Is the way you define terror today the way you've always defined it? Or is it something that has evolved with the time? In other words, now that you've been exposed to so many things and you've seen how the world has done things, and then does your definition has changed?
No, I think terror doesn't have a future because it doesn't have a message. I think democracy...
But is that how you've always seen it?
Yes, and how I see it today. You know, democracy is not just a matter of a majority, it's a matter of a vision. Democracy without vision maybe is a failure. And you have to provide people with vision. And you know, we are overcoming sickness and maladies. Your country, other countries, different maladies. It takes time. We ourselves are very good in medicine. And we are ready to help everything and everybody because we think that's the right way to live together.
Well, there are scholars who believe that actually it was people like you who first showed the world how terror works. There are people who go back, the scholars who go back and say what happened during your tenure in Tunisia, where the Tunisians and Palestinians, that is an example of state-sponsored terror.
No, I never heard anything like it. Look, we were attacked. The United Nations in 1947 has decided to create two states, a Palestinian state, or they call it an Arab state, and a Jewish state. We accepted it. Unfortunately, the Arabs rejected it, and before we had a state, we were attacked. What could we do? But to defend ourselves. That's what we did.
With the benefit of hindsight, was it the best thing to do?
We didn't have an alternative. What can you do if somebody comes to you with a pistol and wants to shoot you? What is your alternatives? And in spite of it, we made peace. I'm very proud about it. And those scholars somehow forget it. You know, in Egypt they didn't want to listen about us. In Jordan they didn't want to listen about it. They have the Khartoum formula, as they call it, no peace, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations. They refused. And he says, you are mistaken. We can live together, we can live in peace together, and we do.
The question is why is that?
I don't know the scholars. Why don't they learn the whole story? What sort of scholars are they?
Why is peace continuing to, I know I asked this before, why is peace continuing to elude that part of the world?
Because the old politics don't have answers to two questions. How to end terror? They shoot terrorists. That's not an answer. You have to, but that's not an answer. And the other because they cannot overcome the social gap. At the present politics, there are too many people who are too rich and too few people who should be able to make a living. We have to change the way of government, and we do, all of us. What are global companies? Global companies don't have arms, don't have rifles, don't shoot, and they say we're equal. No matter what is your color, no matter where from are you. And look at the global governments. You'll find there are people from all over the world, black and white and brown and from Africa and they live together. The politics are like a continuation of a past time where everything should have been done by the sword. You have Nelson Mandela, who had Israel. His dream was to bring an end to wars, no more, to live differently, and we are fighting for it. We are a minority because we believe in one God, because we were against idols, because we were against occupation, because we were the first to revolt against exile in what is Exodus? You sing it, we sing it. And as one of the great poets said, you cannot sing a song of Exodus without a Hebrew accent. That's what we are doing. And we are fighting hard. And it costs us much. You know what it is to lose every third person of your nation? Why? Because it's Jewish? No other reason?
Your successor doesn't seem to think that peace is possible with the Palestinians. Is he right?
Let me say, in a way of humor, every successor is a successor. And I don't think he's right. I'm against what he says, and I don't make a secret from it. It's a democracy. You do have many parties. But I do believe, and I tell it to you from the depth of my heart, because both the Arabs and us, we prefer peace. And peace will win. Peace is not a loser. You know, the problem with the scholars and the problem with the experts, they teach about things that did happen. They know very little about things that may happen. Dreams you don't teach, dreams you dream. Imagination you don't teach at the schools. And all the time repeating the past. We're not going to go back to the past, to the poverty, to the impossible life. Good scholars must have a vision. Otherwise, what do they want to teach our children? I want, and you want, I may imagine, to teach our children that can be a different future, that those scholars never imagined, never forecast. And I would teach our children how to dream and how to imagine, and not how to condemn and accuse and hate.
Looking at what appears to be a hardening of attitudes on both sides. What do you think is going to happen over the next few years, the next decade?
My dear friend, it will be peace. Nobody has an alternative.
How is that going to come about, though?
I think it's moving because I told you, today the real division is not between the political parties, but between two ages. The young people are going to learn how to educate themselves at the universities. That's the alternative. And the other alternative is to go over from the technical and mechanical way of running the world to the digital, to the sophisticated one. And we are helping many countries to do it, you know. We are active in tens of countries, and we do it, including giants like India and China. And we are being accepted there. And we are doing it in Israel. You know, I want to give you an example. In the Perez Center, we have a department which is called Save the Children. We found out that 2,000 young Palestinian people, like our children, were wounded at the war. We decided to take all of them to Jerusalem and to cure them on our account, which we did. Once we are through, the parents, other parents, says, my child, my boy, my girl, wasn't suffering from a war, but they have problems with the head and the heart. Please help us. Until now, we saved 11,000 children by bringing them to our hospitals, covering the expense. Now they turn to us and they say, look, we have children who are suffering from cancer. Please help us. We checked. To cure a child costs us $10,000. Cancer costs $70,000. He says that's a little bit difficult for us to collect the money. So we suggested to them, send your doctors to us, Palestinian doctors. We shall teach them how to handle cancer, and then they'll go back home and do it. Right now we have 250 Palestinian doctors in Israel who are learning how to do it. We have the same at schools, we have joint schools, the same with sports, the same with health. What we are trying to do is to make peace, not between governments, not even between journalists and papers. They criticize. We try to make peace among people, young and old.
I want to end this by taking you back to something you said right at the beginning. Your biggest regret, when you look back, and when you look at the work that you're doing now versus what you once believed and the things you did.
You know, you cannot start peace with a happy end. This is very difficult. There are many memories and prejudices and so-called scholars. But I'm proud that we made peace with two such important countries. I don't have the slightest doubt that we shall achieve peace with the Palestinians as well. And it will be shorter and easier than people think. I didn't give my hope.
Your biggest regret?
My biggest regret that it doesn't go so fast, that life is so complicated. But I prefer to fight difficulties rather than to submit to them. I'm not a young man, you know. I am now almost 93 years. All my life I fought for peace. That I don't regret. I regret that we couldn't achieve it at the same speed and the same way that we should. But you are one and there are other people. And it takes time to convince. And the world is full of prejudices, particularly about the past. The past is a mistake. You know, the past is still shadowing our future. We were not born to be bad people.
The big news is Newsroom.
We also stream live on YouTube.
Whether you're at home, at the office or at the gym, wherever you are, Newsroom is right there with you. Bringing you all the latest news, updates, sports, weather and everything in between. Get all the latest news you need on the go via live streaming on our YouTube channel. That's Newsroom, weekdays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
According to the World Health Organization, the number of people who are